Hello, in this part, I want us to check on the HIV and AIDS data analysis project, and we'll be focusing on Africa. In this point, we'll actually be having 4 files. That's the patient files. We have one of the files dealing with the patient demographics and enrollment, another file actually dealing with the clinical visits and adherence. That's actually the visits file. We also have the viral load and CD4 counts, and finally the ART regimens and outcomes. So let me actually come down here so that you can check on the files. So we have the patients file, we have the visits file, we also have the lab results file, and finally the treatments file. So 4 different files. Now I would actually want us to have an analysis on this, and finally we will have to generate a dashboard. That's a responsive dashboard. So these ones are actually clean files in my case, and what you are going to do is to get directly into data modeling. So before you actually get into data modeling, what you have to do is to close those files first. So you close the patients file, you close the visits file, you close the lab results file, and finally you close the treatments file. So now hit on the power pivot there. Then in this point here, we have what you call manage. You have to click on manage there because we are going to import the 4 files so that we can now do data modeling. And remember, in Excel, you actually do data modeling manually, unlike in Power BI. In Power BI, data modeling is always done for you automatically when it realizes that the tables have common columns. But in Excel, you have to drag and drop. So in this point here, which is actually the home tab, we have get external data from other sources. And in my case, they are basically in CSV format. So CSV is actually text file. If it was actually in Excel format, you have to click on Excel file. So hit on next there. It will ask you for the file path. So you click on browse. It's actually inside the downloads there. It's these ones here. So treatments file, lab results file, visits file, and patients file. I'll start with the patients file. I'll click on it like that. Then I hit on open. Then in this point here, we'll have to check on the preview so that we can decide if you are going to use the first row as the column headers. You can check that I have the patient ID. I also have the age. I have the gender. In this point, I have the country, and they are all in row number 1. So that basically means that we are using this first row as the column headers. So you select on it like that. Then the first row will be promoted to be the column headers. Just like this. Now it's actually done. So hit on finish there, and that's it. Then you just have to hit on close so that it can be loaded. Now after hitting on close, it will be loaded here. And when it is actually fully loaded in this point here, this table import wizard will disappear on its own. That's for the patients file. Now let's actually go into importing the next file. So get into the home tab, get external data from other sources like that. Then scroll down here to where we basically have a text file like that. Then hit on next like that. Then in this point, you have to browse for the file path. So browse like that. Then hit on visits file. So hit on OK there or open. Then we also have to use the first row as the column headers. You can check that the column headers are basically in the first row. Visit ID, we have the patient ID. They are all in row number 1. So you use first row as the column headers like that. Then what remains is to hit on finish. Then you just have to hit on close so that it can actually be loaded on this part here. So close like that. So it will now be loaded here. Then it will disappear on its own when the visits file has actually been fully loaded. That's all. So let's also go to file number 3. So you hit from other sources. Remember, all our files are actually in CSV format. So hit on text file there. Hit on next. Then in this point, the file path, you have to browse. So browse there. Then you hit on lab results. Then hit on open again. Then we have to use the first row as the column headers because our first row is basically having our column headers. So use the first row as the column headers like that. Then you hit on finish. Then in this point, you just have to hit on close. So when it's fully loaded, import wizard will actually disappear on its own. Then we are now remaining with 1 file. So for the 1 file, we have to go to from other sources still. Scroll down there. We have text file because it's basically a CSV format. Hit on next. At this point, you have to browse. It's actually the last one. So the last one is actually the treatments file. So treatments open. Then that's all. Now you have to hit on use first row as the column headers. Check that and hit on finish. Then you have to click on close. So in this point, we have our 4 files here. One of the files is actually inside the patient's sheet here. Another one is actually inside the visits. I can actually click for the patients. This is basically what you have. That's for the patients table. And we also have the visits table here, which is actually the visits file, the lab results, and also the treatments. This is basically what we call the data view. In Power BI, this is what we always call the table view. So table view in Power BI is what you call data view when it comes to Excel. And on this point here, if you want to do the modeling, what you have to do is to hit on diagram view. So you hit on the diagram view so that you can now create the models. You can actually check that it has the tables there connected. So this is basically telling you that we are getting into the data modeling. So what we have to do is to expand this like that, expand this again, and expand this. So when it comes to the patient's file there, we have the patient ID, the age of the patients, the gender, the country. Remember, in this point here, we are actually dealing with Africa, which is actually a continent. So it actually means that in the continent, we have different countries. That's why we have this column here for the country. We have the region, enrollment date, and HIV status. In this point here, for the visits, we have the visit ID, the patient ID, visit date, facility, adherence score. For the lab results, you have the lab ID, patient ID, test date, viral load, CD4 count, test type. Test type is actually the viral load and the CD4 count. And for the treatments, we have the treatment ID, the patient ID, the start date, regimen, duration in months, and the outcome. The outcome can be suppressed, it can be ongoing, it can be switched. So that's all that we basically have here. And I would actually want us to create a data model because these ones are basically 4 different files. So to create a data model out of these files here, we have to identify the primary keys. The patient ID in the patient's file is obviously the primary key. So that actually means that we have to drag this patient ID inside the visits table into the patient ID in the patient's file. That also means that we have to drag this patient ID inside the lab results table into the patient ID in the patient's file or in the patient's table. In this point here, we also do have to drag this patient ID in the treatments table into the patient ID in the patient's table. Why are we actually dragging into the patient ID in the patient's table? Because the patient ID in the patient's table is actually the primary key. Remember, we are always dragging from a region of many into a region of one. So from many to one, in short, we are just dragging into the primary key, just like that, and a relationship will be created there. You can actually check this is a one to many relationship. On this point here, we also do have the patient ID here and the patient ID there. This patient ID here is actually the primary key. So you have to drag this one into the primary key. Just like that, a relationship will actually be created. This one here, we have the patient ID here and we also have the patient ID here. This one here is actually the primary key. And because it's actually the primary key, that actually means that we are dropping it there and a relationship will actually be created. So this one and this one are actually linked because of this connection here. This one and this one are actually linked because of this connection here, and you can check that it's actually activated there. You can also have this one here, which is actually the last one, patient ID to patient ID. So we now have a data model, and I would actually want us to get into the pivot tables so that we can actually try to obtain different insights from our data and finally come up with a dashboard. Remember, you can always change the appearance of this model. I can just click on this or expand this one like that, expand this one again like that. Now you can check that it's changing, expand this one like that. Now you can check that it's actually changing, something like that. You can prefer to have something like this. So that's all. Now let's actually get into the pivot table so that we can do about 10 analytics of our data using this model here. So get yourself into the pivot table. So home tab, click inside the pivot table like that, and that's all. So we are going to insert our pivot table into the existing sheet, and I'll actually say the sheet is actually this one here. We can pick on A1, there's no problem with that. So hit on OK there, hit on OK again. So that's all. Now this is basically our model. You can check that we have the 4 tables there: lab results table, the patients table, the treatments table, and the visits table. So I would actually want us to start with the patient demographics and profiles. So we'll actually check on the total number of patients that we actually do have. We'll also check on the gender distribution. We'll also check on the age distribution. And finally, we'll check on the top countries. For the total patients, we are basically going to use the patient ID inside the patients table, which is actually this one here, because this one is the primary key. So what you are going to do is to drag the patient ID into the values there, and you will actually check that we have the count. So if you actually drag something which is non-numerical into the values drag field, then you'll always obtain the count. So in my case, you can check that we have 1000. So this is basically the number of patients that we do have. I would also want us to obtain the gender distribution. So for the gender distribution, that is the total number of females that we have and the total number of males that we have. Or we can also obtain that one as a percentage. We can obtain it as a count and obtain it as a percentage, which is actually very simple again. So I'll come to this point here and insert a pivot table. So insert, use this workbook's data model. Yes, we are still using the same data model, just like that. So for the patient's table there, we basically have the gender. So what we'll actually do is to drag the gender into the rows like that. Now you can check that I have the females and I also do have the males. So to obtain the count, remember the total count is actually equivalent to 1,000 patients. So to obtain the total count of females and the total count of the males, we have to drag the same patient ID into the values so that it can actually be broken down. So this 1,000 has actually been broken down into two, that is into females and males. So the total number of females that we have is 577 and the total number of males that we do have is 423 and the total count is basically equivalent to 1,000. You might as well consider having this as a percentage, which is actually very simple again. So what you have to do is to expand the patient's table there, drag the same patient ID into the values, and we have this. Now convert this one as a percentage so that we can be having this as a count, then this one is a percentage. That is 577 divided by 1,000 converted to percentage. 423 divided by 1,000 converted to percentage. So what you are going to do is to come to this point here for the second one, which is actually the count of patient ID 2. You click on the down arrow there, value field settings, and in this point we basically have what you call show value as. Then you hit on this down arrow, percentage of the grand totals, then you hit on OK there. So we have 57.70% and we also do have 42.30%. So if you sum these two, it will actually get you 100%. So this is basically what you call gender distribution. So distribution by the count and distribution by percentage, and this was basically the total number of patients that we actually do have. So I want us now to obtain the average of age based on the gender. So we have the females here and we also do have the males. We can actually do that in a different report. So get into the insert tab there, tables group, hit on the pivot table there, use this workbook's data model existing worksheet, which is actually okay C6. So hit on OK there. So average of age by gender. So get into the patient's table there, we have the age and we also do have the gender. Drag the age into the values, just like that, and we basically have the age and the gender. But in this case, you actually realize that this is the sum of age. Hit on the down arrow there, value field settings, then you select average. Hit on OK there. So the average age of the females is 39.26 years and the average age of the males is 40.6 years. We can have these ones as whole numbers, so just select all of them like that. Get yourself into the home tab there, number group, and top off the decimal places like that. So we have 39, that's approximately 39 or 39 years to the nearest whole number, 41 years to the nearest whole number, and 40 years to the nearest whole number. This one actually tells you that the average age of the 423 male patients who were actually tested is equivalent to 41 years, and the average age of the 577 patients who were actually tested is equivalent to 39 years. So the general average is actually equivalent to 40 years. That's the general average of the patients who were actually tested of HIV. It was actually equivalent to 40 years. Just like that, now I want us to check this one based on the countries. So I want us to break down this 1,000 based on the countries. Remember, we are actually doing the HIV test on the African continent. So what you actually have to do is to insert another report. So get yourself into the insert tab there, tables group, click on the pivot table report, use this workbook's data model, which is actually okay. And in this point, you actually realize that we have the country. So you drag the country into the rows like that. Now we have Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. So I want us to break down the count of the patients based on these countries. So you have to drag the patient ID into the values there. Now you can check that in Kenya, 197 people were actually tested. In Nigeria, 219 were tested. In South Africa, 210 were tested. In Tanzania, 193 were actually tested. In Uganda, 181 were actually tested. So if you sum all these numbers here, you will actually get 1,000, which is actually here, and it actually represents the total number of people who were actually tested of HIV. So the leading countries in this point, you can check, those ones will actually be Nigeria with 219, South Africa with 210, and number 3 will actually be Kenya. So a lot of emphasis has to be done to Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, because the rate is actually too high as compared to the other countries. This one will actually fall on the patient demographics and the profiles, but it can also play a factor when it comes to the geographical distribution, because this one can also be part of geographical distribution because we are dealing with the countries, and countries are actually the geographical locations. So what you can as well do in this point is to break down this count based on the urban region or the rural region. So that one will actually be the geographical location again. So this one plays both the geographical location and the patient demographics and profiles. So allow me to actually bring the one for the regions. That's the rural region and the urban regions. So I'll get into the insert tab there, tables group, hit on the pivot table there, use this workbook's data model, which is actually okay. In my case, I hit on okay there. So expand the patients table there, drag the region into the rows, just like that. So we have the rural and the urban, and just drag the patient ID into the values so that you can obtain the count. Now you can check that for the rural, we actually have 487 HIV patients, and we also have 513 HIV patients from the urban region. So we can obtain this one as a percentage. So what you have to do is to drag the patient ID into the values again. Then we just have to convert that one as a percentage of the grand total. Hit on the down arrow there, value field settings. Then come to this point here, show value as. Then hit on this down arrow, percentage of the grand total. Hit on OK there. So this one is basically 48.70%. This one is also 51.30%. So that's it. So that's all about the geographical distribution. So I can actually bring this one down here. Just like that. It's actually done. Now I want us to check on the distribution of outcomes. So we have the ongoing, we have the suppressed, we have switched. So to check on the distribution, first get into the insert tab so that you can actually insert a pivot table report there. So use this workbook's data model. So hit on OK there. Then on this part here for the treatments, we have the outcome. Drag the outcome into the rows. So we have these ones as our outcomes. We have ongoing, suppressed, switched. Now I want us to obtain the count of these outcomes so that you can actually check on the leading one. So drag the outcome again into the values so that you can basically obtain the count of outcome. So this is basically what we have, and we can actually check that the suppression rate has to be very high because we have a lot of patients whose outcome is actually suppressed. So 1914. So I can click inside those values there, click on the down arrow here, value field settings, get myself into the show value as, then I hit as percentage of the grand total so that I can basically obtain them as percentages. So the suppression rate is basically equivalent to 76.56%, which is actually very high. And at this point, we can also try to check on the suppression rate or these rates broken down by countries. So what you actually do in that point is to expand this one here for the patients table, drag the country into the columns there. So allow me to now hide the field list. Now you can check that the suppression rate for Kenya is 15.16%, suppression rate for Nigeria is 17.28%, for South Africa is 14.88%, Tanzania 15.16%, Uganda 14.08%. And the total suppression rate is actually 76.56%. So you can check that the country which is actually leading when it comes to the suppression rate is actually Nigeria, and the country which actually needs some improvement when it comes to the suppression rate is actually Uganda and South Africa. So basically that's how you can check on the breakdown of the outcomes, and that's how you can also analyze the suppression rate by the countries. So at this point, we actually know that the suppression rate is actually the lowest when it comes to Uganda. So in this point too, I would actually want us to check on the most common regimen. So we have to insert a pivot table report. So insert tab, tables group, hit on the pivot table there, use this workbook's data model, then existing worksheet, which is actually okay, then just hit on OK there. So regimen is basically inside the treatments table. It's actually here. So you have to drag the regimen into the rows like that. So we have ABC plus 3TC plus DTG, DTG based, others, TDF plus 3TC plus EFV. So to actually obtain the breakdown of this one so that you can actually understand the most common regimen, we have to drag the same regimen into the values so that you can obtain the count of regimen. So in this point, you can check that the most common one is actually this one here, which is actually DTG based because we have it at a count of 654. So we can actually conclude that the most common regimen is actually DTG based. So in this part, we can also check on the average adherence score. So we will actually insert a pivot table report. So table script, click on the pivot table there, use this workbook's data model existing worksheet, the one that I've actually selected on G15, hit on OK there. So the adherence score is actually inside the visits table here. So we have it on this point. It's actually a numerical column. I can actually click on this down arrow so that you can check. Now you can check that it's basically a numerical column. I would actually want us to obtain the average adherence score. So drag this into the values there, and we can actually check that we have the sum. So hit on this down arrow, value field settings there, average, then I just have to click on OK. So the average adherence score is basically equivalent to 84.98354, which is not actually that bad. But I would actually want us to check if there's a difference in the adherence score based on the age. So we'll check for the younger patients that's less than 30 years. Then we'll check for the patients above 30 years. So what we'll actually do in this point is to create a measure. So I'll actually click in this point here so that I can get these tables here. So I want us to create a measure here. So I'll right click there, then hit on add measure. So the name of the measure is actually the average adherence, like that. You can have something like that. So average adherence score for the patients less than 30 years. So that's it. Now remember, the age is basically inside the patient's table here. So do not actually forget that. So in this point here, we'll actually bring in the aspect of filtering, and that aspect of filtering will actually be wanting us to use the calculate function. And for us to actually obtain the average, we must also use the average function. So it's equivalent to calculate like that, then bring in the average. So we are basically obtaining the average of the adherence score, and the adherence score is actually inside the visits table. So visits table like that. So we have the adherence score here. So you double click on it like that. So obtain for me the average of this, then close the average function, given that the age is actually less than 30. So the age is actually inside, it's actually a column inside the patient's table there. So comma, so the age is actually inside the patient's table. So patient's table like that, that's basically where we have the age. So where the age, double click on it like that. So where the age is basically less than 30 years. So obtain for me the average of the adherence score, which is actually inside the visits table, where the age, which is actually a column inside the patient's table, is less than 30. So you close the calculate function like that. And now in this point here, you'll actually check that this measure will be inserted in the visits table. So hit on OK there, and a measure will be inserted here. So the average adherence score for the patients whose age is actually less than that. So that's actually done. And what I'll actually do so that I can insert it next to this one here, this pivot table is actually selected. So I'll actually drag it just below it there. And now you can check that the average adherence score for the patients whose age is actually less than 30 is 84.82512385. And I would also want us to obtain the average adherence score for the patients whose age is actually greater than 30. So come to this point here again for the visits table there, right click so that you can hit on add measure, or you can just come to this point here for the power pivot tab there. Then we have what you call measures. You click on it like that. Then you just have to click on the new measure there. So the measure will actually be inserted in the visits table there. Average adherence score for the patients whose age is actually greater than or equivalent to 30, just like that. So we are going to use the calculate function and the average function. Average adherence score. The adherence score is actually inside the visits table. So visits like that, so that you can have the adherence score there. Double click on it, then you have to close the average function, where the patient's age is actually greater than or equivalent to 30. So remember, the age is actually inside the patient's table. We have the age here. You double click on it like that, then we say greater than or equivalent to 30. So the age has to be greater than or equivalent to 30. You close the calculate function there, and you hit on OK. So a measure will also be inserted in this point here, and you can actually see that it has been checked. And in this part, you can check that the value is 85.04594369. So the adherence score is basically lower for the patients who are actually having the age to be less than 30. So we can conclude that the average adherence score is actually lower for the younger patients. In this part, I would also want us to check on the average CD4 count. So we are actually going to insert a report there. So get into the insert tab, tables group, pivot table there. Use this workbook's data model existing worksheet, which is actually J8 there. Then hit on OK. So for the average CD4 count, you just expand the lab results there. We have the CD4 count here. Drag it into the values. And now you can check that we have the sum of CD4 count. So change that sum into average. So value field settings, average, hit on OK. Average of CD4 count is actually 426. Let me actually deselect the field list there. 426.34833333. So you can say the average is actually 426 cells. Now it's also very important for us to obtain the average viral load. So I'll get into the insert tab there, tables group, click on the pivot table there, use this workbook's data model, then I hit on OK there. Then expand the lab results table. That's where we basically have the viral load. So drag it into the values there and you'll actually obtain the sum. And in my case, I actually wanted to obtain the average of the viral load. So click on the average, then hit on OK there. So we have the average of the viral load to be equivalent to 654. So I want us to create this kind of a dashboard. So you can check that this one here is actually for the title. This one here is actually a card for the total patients to be 197. When it comes to Kenya, you can check that the slicer there is actually active. I can actually remove the slicer there, and this is it now. So the countries, we have Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. Those ones are actually inside the slicer. And you can check that for the cards. I also have 5 of them. Total patients, CD4 count, average age, average viral load, and average adherence score. This is actually the patient distribution. So when it comes to Kenya, we have 197. You can check that it's actually very close to 200. When it comes to Nigeria, you can check that it's about 225 there. It's actually 219. When it comes to South Africa, it's something like 220 something still, or 210. When it comes to Tanzania, it's 193. Finally, when it comes to Uganda, we have 181. So you can actually apply these slicers here. For Kenya, you can check that it's 197. So you can just click on Kenya like that so that you can get the column for Kenya alone. We have 197. And you can also click for Nigeria like that. Yeah, something like that. And that slicer actually runs the whole of this dashboard. You can check that in this point here, it's actually responding still. If you click on South Africa like that, you can check there's some response. On this part too, for the outcome distribution, you can check that we have ongoing, suppressed, and switched. Switched actually means that these patients were actually on a given medication, but they had to switch because of poor results. So the number of those who actually switched when it comes to Uganda is actually equivalent to 4.48%. The suppression rate is actually not bad. We have 75.05%. And the ongoing medication is actually equivalent to 20.47%. So the total patients when it comes to Uganda, you can check we have 181. CD4 count is actually 408.307. Average age is 40. Average viral load is actually 500.272. Average adherence score is 85.36157. So if you click on Nigeria like that, the whole thing actually changes when it comes to the card. Click on Kenya again, the cards change. Click on South Africa, the cards actually change. And I want us now to design this kind of a dashboard. So stay tuned. So we are actually going to insert a sheet there. So click on a new sheet so that you can have a new sheet there. So I'll select A and B, that's A column and B column. Get myself into the home tab there. Then come to this point here for the field. Then I'll actually select this color here. So dark blue, just like that. Now, the next thing for me is to actually select a shape which will actually get me a space for the title. So in that point, I'll also get myself into the insert tab there. Then we have the illustrations. Then I click on the shape. In my case, I actually want this rectangular one with rounded corners. So I'll click on it like that. Then come to this point here. Then drag it all the way up to that point there. You can say that point there on P. I can bring it downwards a bit like that. But in my case, I don't actually want this kind of a fill. So what I'll actually do is to get myself into the shape format there. Inside the shape fill, we actually have white. So I'll click on white like that. then the shape outline will actually have no outline. Then finally for the effects, we'll actually have shadow, then the first one here when it comes to outer. So bottom right offset, just like that. And I think it's actually okay in my case. So to make this one so much good, first of all, I'll have to get myself into the view tab there. Then I actually deselect the grid lines. Now you can check that it looks good. So for us to actually obtain the one for the cards, so what you can actually do is to duplicate this so that you can just resize. And to duplicate this, just click on it like that. Control Shift on the keyboard, then you drag it downwards. It's always very simple, just like that, and that's done. So now I just have to resize this so that I can obtain the one for the cards. So something close to this, then drag it upwards like that. It's actually done. So click on it like that again, then I hit Control C on the keyboard, then V to paste again, V. We actually add about 5 different cards. So I love this one here. So what you can actually do in this point is to select all the 5 cards. So I'll click on the first card there, then hit Control on the keyboard, select the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, get myself into the shape format there. Then we basically have what you call arrange group. Hit on align there, we basically have what you call distribute horizontally. So I'll click on distribute horizontally like that, and an even space will actually be generated between the cards. You can check that there's a small space just before the first card, and we can just push it a bit like that, and that's all. Now we have our 5 cards there. So the next thing is for us to actually duplicate this card again. So hit Control C and Control V, or you can just Control Shift, then you drag it downwards. So I have it down here, then expand it like that, then also drag it to the right there, and that's actually okay. But you can check that this one is actually more rounded, so we can just kill these rounds. So just push that dot there to the corner, just like that, and you can check that the rounds are actually reducing. Just like that, it's actually done. So Control Shift so that you can actually drag this to this part here, and that's it. So I have this one again on the other end there, and that will be good. So you can just resize these two a bit. So push that one like that. Then we can also push this one here like that. So that's done. Now the next thing is for us to have a larger card here on this part here. Click on this one here, Control Shift on the keyboard, then just drag this one to the other end there. And now let's actually go to the other end so that you can actually have this one fitting on this point here. But before we actually do that, make sure you actually come to this point here and zoom out. So zoom out to 90 like that. So now drag this one down here like that. And that's cool. You can still bring it down a bit because we have a space there, and that's okay. So we can still bring these two down. So bring this one down like that, bring this one down again like that. So that's it. Now we can just reduce the size on this end. So because this one is actually health related, we can have a plus here with a red fill. So insert, then illustrations, I click on the shapes there, then we have a plus here. So I love it somewhere there, then we'll definitely get it a red fill formatting. So get yourself into the shape formats there. We basically have the shape fill, and we have to click on the red format, just like that. It's done. Down here we also have to get ourselves a navigation pane, which is actually for the dashboard, for the reports, and finally the one for the support, which is actually contact us. So insert tab there, then illustrations, then we click on the shapes, then we have to click on this rectangular one here with the rounded corners. So you pick on it like that, then just have it there, then that's okay. So expand it a bit like that, then have it somewhere at the center there. So click on the shape like that, Control Shift on the keyboard, then drag this one down there, then Control Shift on the keyboard again, drag this one down there. So that's all. Now select all these three. So the first one there, and the second one, and finally the third one. Then we have to get ourselves into the shape format there. We have the arrange group, align. Then in this point here, we have to align at the center. Then we also have to distribute vertically. So vertical distribution, that's done. So for this first one here, we'll have the shape field to be white. So you click on it like that, get yourself into the shape format there. Then the shape field white like that. Then we can actually give the outline to be this kind of a green, which is actually green accent 6. So I'll actually click on that one to be our outline, and that's okay in my case. Now for this one here, I'll click on it like that, then the shape format there, then get myself into the shape field, then I'll get this color here. So click on it, that's actually done. Come to this point again and do the same thing. So shape format, this point here for the shape field, I have to select green accent 6. So that's all about the design. Now I want us to make this one meaningful. So this one here will have something like world aid as a text. So edit text there, we'll have it as world aid like that. Then we have to select everything there. Then we have to bold. Then we have it at the center. And in this point here, we'll have it to be dashboards. So right click on it, then edit text and have it as dashboard like that. Then just have to select everything there, then give this kind of a font color. Then you just have to bold like that. Then you have to get yourself into the home tab still. Then you have to get middle alignment. So that's all. So done. In this point too, we have to right click so that you can actually edit text and have it as reports like that. Then on this part, right click so that we can also have it as support. You'll actually realize that when I click on the reports here, it should actually be taking me to the reports. Remember, we have our reports, all of them in sheet 1. So in short, whenever I actually click on this reports shape here, it should actually be taking me to sheet 1. So what do we actually do? We have to create a link. So you click on that shape there. Then after clicking on the shape, you have to right click and hit on link. So we are actually placing the hyperlink or inserting the hyperlink in this document, and the cell reference is actually sheet 1. So if I click on this reports here, it will actually be taking me to sheet 1, and that sheet 1 is actually what contains my reports. So that's actually what I wanted. So hit on OK there. Now you'll actually realize that if I hover my mouse here, you'll actually be getting a plus with the arrow ends. But if I hover my mouse there, you'll actually be getting that sign for the link. So if I click on it like that, now you can check that it's actually bringing me to this sheet 1. So we had actually created a link so that it can actually bring us from the dashboard to this page here. So, but when you are actually in this point here, you find it so hard to actually get back. So to get back again, you have to click on this sheet 5 here. So what we can actually do is to come to this point again here. Then we have to right click and say insert. So I want us to insert column there. Then we just have to expand it like that. So that's it, and that's done. Now we have to come to this point here, select these two like that. Then we hit on Ctrl C on the keyboard. Then come to this point here for sheet 1. Then we say Ctrl V to paste, just like that, and it's done. Now, given that you are in this point here and you would want to get back to the dashboard, you actually realize that you have to create a link, which is actually linking this one here to sheet 5, because in sheet 5 it's where we actually do have the dashboard. So you come to this point here, right click on it, then get yourself into the link there. Then inside the link we have to say place in this document. Then it should be taking me to sheet number 5. So that's all. Now hit OK there. So that's now done. So if you come to this point here and click on dashboard, then it will actually bring me to the dashboard. If you click on the reports, then it will also take you to the reports. Now there's something which actually remains, which is basically for the support. So we can basically insert a sheet there for the support. So we can have it as the last one there. So in this point here for the support, we might be having the regional coordinator like that. We might also be having these ones will actually be the emails. So we have the email for the regional coordinator. Double click on it to out of it. We also have the email for the doctors. So we can say regional doctors like that. Then we can also say continental coordinators, and then that's all. So it should actually be coordinator. Now in this part, we will have to generate the emails. So we can say regional coordinator like that at gmail.com, something like that for illustrations only. In this point, we can also say regional doctors at gmail.com, and this point here, continental coordinator at gmail.com. That's all. So double click on column B there to out of it. So this is basically where we have the support. So we can say in this point here, support or contact us, just like that. So in this point here, whenever we are actually in sheet 1 and we would like to get to the sheet for the support, we have to click on this point here. But you actually realize that we have not linked it with sheet 6. So you click on that shape there, right click on it so that you can actually link. So we are actually placing that link or the hyperlink in this document, and it should actually be opening sheet 6. So hit on OK there. That's done. So whenever you actually click on this point here for the support like that, it's actually bringing you to this case here. But you actually realize that the only option to get back is by using this sheet 1, sheet 5 and sheet 6 navigations here, which should not actually be the case in my point. So I just have to select column A like that, right click, then we just say insert. So expand it like that. Yes, now get back into sheet 5 there, then select those ones, hit Ctrl C on the keyboard, then come to this sheet 6 here, then you just have to hit Ctrl V to paste. Whenever you are actually in this point here for the support, you can actually get back to the reports, which is actually okay. You can click on the reports like that, and we are now inside the reports sheet. But what if we would actually want to get to the dashboard? Because to get to the dashboard in this point, it actually means that you have to get to the reports so that you can now click inside the reports for the one for the dashboard, which is actually a tedious thing in my case here. So we just have to link this one here directly to the dashboard. So what we'll actually do is to click on this shape here for the dashboard, then right click on it, then hit on the link. Then it should actually be taking us to sheet number 5. Remember, sheet number 5 is where we basically have the dashboard. Sheet number 1 is where we have the reports, and sheet number 6 is actually for the support. So it should actually be taking us to sheet number 5 where we have the dashboard. Then just hit on OK there. So that's all. So if we click on this one here for the reports, it actually takes us to the reports. If we actually want to get into the one for the dashboard, you just have to click on the dashboard. It actually takes you to the dashboard. So in this point here for the dashboard, now you can check that you can easily navigate into the reports, and I would also want us to navigate into the support, this one here for contact us, which is basically sheet number 6. So what you are going to do is to click on the support there, right click on it so that you can actually link. So we are actually linking, and we are placing the hyperlink in this document to sheet 6 like that. Then you just have to hit on OK. So it's now done. So if you come to this point here for the dashboard, you can easily get into the reports there, which is actually this one here. And from the reports, you can also get back into the dashboard. Very simple. And when you are in the dashboard again, you can actually get into the support like that. And when you are in the support, you can also get back into the dashboard. That's it. So basically, that's how you can actually do the navigation. Now, I would actually want us to have a title here. Then after having the title there, then we can actually get the titles again for these cards, then the titles for these other remaining 3 cards there. So this one will actually be the title. So the title in this point will be Treatment and Testing of HIV and AIDS Patient, that is in the African continent, in bracket. So we are going to right click on it like that. Then we actually hit on edit text and say treatment and testing of HIV and AIDS patients like that. Then what you have to do is to select everything there, get yourself into the home tab there. Then we have the font color. Then you just have to hit on this dark blue one, just like that. Then that's all. Now you can actually check that we have it there. Then in this part, you can also say shift enter so that you can actually get to the next line. So opening bracket, then say African continent. So African continent, then you just have to close it like that. So that's actually done. So we come to this first card here. So this first one here is actually the total patients. Then this one here will actually be the CD4 count. Then this one will be the average age, average viral load, then finally the average adherence score. So for the total patients, we just click on it like that, right click, then we say edit text, total patients. Done. So what you have to do again is to select everything like that, get yourself into this font color here, then click on dark blue like that. So total patients. In this point, you click on it again like that, right click, edit text. Then in this point, we will also say CD4 count like that. Select everything, then hit on deep blue color there, CD4 count. In this point, we will have the average age. So you click on the card there, right click, then we hit on edit text and say average age. So select everything again like that, then you hit on deep blue for the font color. In this point, we will also be having the average viral load. So you right click, then we hit on edit text, AVG, that's the average viral load, just like that, and select everything again like that, hit on deep blue font color. Then finally on this point, we'll also have to right click, edit text there and say average adherence score, like that. What you have to do is to select everything there, then you hit on deep blue font color there. So we basically have everything here. So we'll have this one here to be the patient distribution. Then finally this one will actually be the count of regimen. So we click on it like that, right click, then we have edit text and say patient distribution, like that. So select everything again, hit on deep blue font color there, patient distribution, click on this one, right click, then we have edit text and say count of regimen. So what you have to do is to select everything again like that, deep blue font color. Then on this part here, we will actually click on it again, then right click and say outcome distribution. So outcome distribution, like that, and that's it. Select all, then deep blue font color. So we can have all this in a bold format. So select everything again like that, then bold, that's all. So select this again, then bold. Come to this part, select bold. Come to this part again, select bold. Come to this part again, select bold. Come to this point again, select bold. Select bold. Select bold. Select, that's finally, and you just have to bold. Now let's actually identify the total number of patients that we have, the CD4 count, the average age, and the average viral load, and the average adherence score. So let's first deal with this first. Let's first deal with these cards here, because there's nothing we can actually do there when it comes to the title. That's actually done. So let's now address these cards here. So for the total patients, we can actually try to drag these cards up there. So we can now insert a text box. So insert, then get yourself into the illustrations there, shapes. Then you just have to click on this part here, which is basically the text box. Or you can just come to this point here. Inside the insert tab, we have this text here. You click on it like that and you have the text box. So I want to actually have this kind of a text box here, like that. So given that we already have a text box, then we basically have to create a link. So get into the view tab there so that you can actually activate the formula bar. In my case, it was actually activated. So it's actually this one here. So you come to this point here and type equivalent sign. Then you have to get yourself into the reports. So the reports in my case are actually inside sheet 1. So we would like to obtain the total number of patients. Click on it like that, hit enter on the keyboard, and you'll actually get this kind of an error. So what you have to do so that you can solve that, allow me to first select all of them and backspace. So what you just have to do in this case is to come down here and say is equivalent to 100. So hit enter on the keyboard. Now we'll actually be using this one. So there's no difference between these two. So only that in this point here, we just linked to this cell here, which is basically on G19. So get back to sheet number 5 there. And inside this text box, we can actually say is equivalent to. Let's now get back into the reports there and say is equivalent to 1000. So the second one, which is actually this one here, you can check in this point. So it's actually sheet 1, and in sheet 1 we are actually having a cell reference to G20. So the moment I hit enter there, you can actually check that I have 1000, which is actually okay. And on this part, I can actually bring this text box. So Control C and Control V. So bring this one here like that, somewhere there. So I'll actually click on it like that. Then this one is basically for the CD4 count. So for the CD4 count, you can actually check that we have the average in this point to be is equivalent to 426. So we'll actually use an equivalent sign again so that you can actually do the cell referencing. So just like that. So we'll now be using this H20. You can actually check on the name box there, H20. So get yourself to this point again and say is equivalent to, then get yourself into the sheet 1 there, is equivalent to H20, hit enter on the keyboard. That's all. Now click on it again, Ctrl C and Ctrl V to paste. So you can actually check that it's very simple like that. Then on this point, we actually click on it again, then remove that. For the average age, let's now get back into the reports first. The average age is actually here. It's actually equivalent to 40. So we are actually using the average age regardless of the gender. So it's equivalent to 40 here. So we get back to sheet number 5 there and click on the card there and say is equivalent to, get back to the reports there, then say is equivalent to 40. And now you can actually check that we have that get pivot data. Whenever it actually appears there, then you won't actually get the results. So if I hit enter there, you will actually get that kind of an error. So like we have been doing, you just have to come to this point here and say is equivalent to what you have on this part here, and that's all, which is actually 39.83. So don't worry about that 39.8 something. So if we chop the decimal places, you'll actually get the same 40. So get yourself back into the dashboard there and say is equivalent to, then get yourself into the reports, then is equivalent to 40, hit enter on the keyboard. We have a 40 there. For the viral load, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and bring it to this point here like that. Yes. And for the viral load, we can actually come to this point here and check that the viral load is actually 654.25. So it's equivalent to what we have there. Hit enter on the keyboard, and that's it. So get back into the dashboard there and say is equivalent to, and for the viral load, get back into the reports there and say is equivalent to what you have on I20. Hit enter on the keyboard. That's it. Average adherence score. So Ctrl C to copy that, Ctrl V to paste. So bring this text box to this part here like that. Then for the adherence score, we can actually check that we have it to be equivalent to 84.98354. So these ones were basically the adherence score based on the age, but this one was actually for the total population. So we can say is equivalent to what you have there. Hit enter on the keyboard. So 84.98354. So get back to sheet 5 there, click on that text box, come to this point here, erase that and say is equivalent to, get back to the reports there and say is equivalent to what you have on G17, hit enter on the keyboard. That's it. Allow me to actually do some formatting here. So we can actually click on the text box there so that you can actually get this shape format. Then we have what you call shape outline. In my case, for the shape outline, we'll actually say no outline like that. And when you say actually no outline, you can actually check that the border actually disappears. And on the other case, we can actually get to use this dark blue font there so that we can also bold and change the font type. So we can have band script semi-bold, something like that, which is actually okay in my case. So drag it up there like that. Now we can actually increase the font size. So have it at 14. Yeah. Now what you actually do is to click on that text box there, get yourself into the home tab, copy, then you hit on format painter. Now you can actually come to this point, just click on that point like that, and you'll actually check that the formatting has actually been applied. Get yourself again into the home tab there, copy, format painter, click on this point here for the average age like that, and you'll have the formatting applied. Home tab again, copy, format painter, then you click on this one here for the average viral load. It's actually done. Home tab again, copy, format painter, then you click on this point here again for the average adherence score, and you will have the result there. So we can just adjust this a bit like that, adjust this like that, take this one again up there, take this one up there a bit, take this one again up there. Now we can check on the patient distribution across the African countries that we actually had. So these ones were the countries that we have, and these 1000 were coming from these countries here. So you can actually break down that 1000 so that you can actually know the exact number for each country. So in Kenya we have 197, Nigeria 219, South Africa 210, Tanzania 193, Uganda 181. So you click inside the data like that to get yourself into the pivot table analyze tab. There we have the pivot chart. You click on it, then we can use this column chart. So you just have to hit on OK there, click on it like that, Ctrl C to actually copy that, get yourself to sheet 5 there, then hit Ctrl V on the keyboard to paste. So Ctrl C to copy, Ctrl V to paste. So just adjust this so that it can actually fit into what we had here. So like that, then bring it down again, or you can just have it up there. This part, take it to the right there, and I think it's actually done. Just a bit here, and that's it. Now let's also check on this point here. This one is actually the count of regimen, so we'll actually be using the bar chart here. So for the regimen, we can also get ourselves into the report here. Drag this one down here. This is basically for the regimen. So I'll actually click inside the report there, pivot table analyze tab. Then in this part here we have the tools group, pivot chart there. Then we have to click on the bar chart. Then this is it. So I'm going to hit on OK there. So click on the chart there, Ctrl C to actually copy, then get yourself into sheet 5 there, then Ctrl V to paste. So that's it. So we can just adjust this a bit like that. So take this one again, and that's it. For this point here, we will basically be having the outcome distribution. So you get yourself into the reports again like that. Then for the outcome distribution, so we have the ongoing, the suppressed, the switched, that is in Kenya, in Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. So we can actually use a stacked column chart. So you click inside the report like that, get yourself into the pivot table analyze tab, then you hit on the pivot chart there. Then we have what you call a stacked. This is basically a clustered, but in my case, I would actually prefer to have a stacked so that it can actually save me the space there. So hit on OK. And this is it. Click on the visualization there, Ctrl C to actually copy, get yourself into the report there, then hit Ctrl V to paste. So what remains is for us to actually drag it down like that. So what actually remains for us is actually to do the cosmetic part. So we can start by removing these buttons, the count of patient ID, country, count of regime, outcome, count of outcome. Those ones are what we basically call the buttons. So you click on the chart area there, get yourself to where we have one button, then you right click. So hide all field buttons on the chart. Click on it like that. Come to this point again. For the regimen, right click, hide all field buttons like that. Come to this point again, you click count of outcome, right click, then hide all the field buttons. So click on this point here for the total, backspace so that you can actually remove. Click on this point again for the total, backspace to remove. On this part again, click on the total there at the top, backspace to remove. The total on the right, backspace again to remove. Now, in this point, we can also have this legend at the bottom. So what you can actually do is to right click. After right clicking, we have what you call format legend, and we can actually choose to have it at the bottom, just like that. And allow me to actually cancel that so that you can check how it is. So it's actually good. Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. Now, the other thing in this point is to actually remove these borders here. You can actually check this thin line here, this thin line again, and this thin line on this part. So to actually remove that, you just have to double click on it like that. Then we basically have what you call border. So inside the border, we actually say no line. Then click outside. Very simple. Double click on this point again, no line for the border. That's all. On this part again, double click on it, then we say no line for the border. That's all. Now we can also remove these horizontal lines. So you click on one of the horizontal lines there. So you click on one of them like that and make sure that all of them have been selected. Then you just hit on backspace. Come to this point again, you click on one of them like that, then you backspace. So That's it. Now let's also check on this point here. So you click on one of them like that, then you backspace. So what you can actually do in this point is to change the color of these columns so that we can have this kind of a color, and that's it. And we will also change these colors of the bars so that you can also have something baby blue like this. So it's actually very simple. So you just click on it once like that, then we have what you call format. Inside format, we have what you call shape fill. Then you can just come to this point here and you can click on the first one, this kind of a color, and this is green accent 6. Then on this point, we can also click on it once like that, get yourself into the format tab there. Then for the shape fill, we'll actually have the dark blue. So that's it. In this point, I would also want us to format this one here so that we can have something close to a graph. So click on it like that, get yourself into the design tab, and we can choose something more of a graph like that. And I think that's actually okay in my case. That's fine. At this point, we can also insert a slicer so that it can actually enable us to command all these visualizations. So to actually insert a slicer, we'll actually have a slicer which is actually based on the countries, because we are actually having the countries in this point here. We also have the countries there, and we would also be wanting to check on the total number of patients in each country. So if we click on Kenya, we'll check on the patients from Kenya, the average of the CD4 count of those patients, the average age of those patients in Kenya, the average viral load of those patients in Kenya, and the average adherence score of those patients in Kenya. So to actually do all that, we have to insert a slicer. So insert tab there. Then we have the filters group here. Click on the slicer. Then in this point here, we'll actually click on the data model. Then I hit on open. So in this point here, you can check that for the patients table, we have the country. So we are actually creating a slicer based on the country. Just like that, and I just have to hit on OK. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll click on this slicer like that, get myself into the slicer tab there, and you can actually check that we have one column. Yes, this is basically one column, but I want to have 5 different columns so that it can actually go horizontally. So if I make the columns to be 2, now you can check that we have 2 columns. So if I make it to be 3, now you can check that we have Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. They are now 3 columns, 4 columns there, then 5 columns. So that's basically what I wanted. I wanted 5 columns so that this slicer will actually go horizontally. So reduce the size like that, drag this to the right, also drag this one here to the left there, and I think it's now done. So I can click on this one here. Don't worry about this one, we can just resize. So resize that, bring it down like that. At this point, click on it again like that, then you bring it down. So something like that. That's done. Now what remains for us is to actually link all the reports to this slicer. So you have to click on the slicer so that you can actually get the slicer tab, and we have what you call report connections. You click on it like that. Now select all these reports. So in short, we are connecting all these reports to one slicer so that it can actually command all those reports. So select all of them like that. Then up here, you also have to tick these 2 like that. Then you just have to hit on OK. Now, be very keen. So whenever I actually click on Kenya, check what actually happens. We have 197 there, 438, 40, 615, 85. Everything is actually changing. So this one actually changed. So get back to Nigeria again. This one is actually responding. Pay attention to this point here. Let me actually click on South Africa. It's actually responding. Pay attention to all these cards. Let me actually click on Tanzania like that. They are all responding. So it's now a fully responsive dashboard. And the slight thing that you can actually do in this point is to change the font of the titles there. We can have this one to be automatic. That's black. Select again that one. We can have it at black. Black is actually automatic. So black again. Select everything here again. Then give it a black font color. Then this one again, a black font color. Then on this point, we can as well have a black font color. There's no problem with that. So that's all about our dashboard. So if you want to clear the filters, you just click on this point here. So that's all, and thanks for staying tuned.